Picture this. The year is 1953. It's the absolute height of the Cold War, a time completely defined by this invisible, high-stakes global standoff. And behind the heavily guarded, closed doors of the CIA, a clandestine program is being born. Its name, Project MKUltra. Now, for years, this name existed only as a whisper. It was this dark, almost unbelievable legend of government overreach and psychological manipulation. But what we're going to be looking at in this explainer is absolutely not a theory. It's not fiction. We're talking about one of the most chilling, highly documented chapters in 20th century history. It was a project that literally sought to understand and master the human mind. And in its relentless pursuit of that goal, it bypassed every single ethical boundary you could possibly imagine.
Okay, let's dive into this. To truly grasp MKUltra, we have to ask ourselves, what happens when government paranoia operates in total darkness? Because this program, it wasn't just some random accident. It was a deliberate, highly structured response to a very specific kind of fear. When you have an institution with just immense resources that is terrified of an outside threat, and when it's allowed to operate completely hidden from public view or any kind of legal oversight, well, the results can be catastrophic.
Section 1. Cold War Paranoia. The driving force.
To really ground ourselves in the reality of this operation, just look at the massive gaps in time here. The program is born in 1953, operating in total, absolute secrecy. And it isn't until 20 years later, in 1973, that a desperate order is given to completely destroy the files. Then it takes another 2 years for the first public revelations to happen in 1975. So for over 2 decades, this dark legend existed as a day-to-day reality for the agency, while the public was kept completely in the dark. That is just a staggering amount of time for a covert operation of this scale to run unchecked.
So why did they do it? The CIA's Technical Services Division wasn't just experimenting for the fun of it. They were driven by a desperate, consuming fear. When they looked at the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea, they genuinely believed a sort of brainwashing arms race was already well underway against American POWs. The CIA felt like they were falling behind in this terrifying new reality. They believed unequivocally that they needed to develop their own arsenal of psychological weaponry just to fight back.
Section 2. The Dark Ambition. The Quest for Mind Control.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive disconnect between their bureaucratic intent and the actual human reality. On paper, the CIA's stated goal was the manipulation of mental states and the alteration of brain function through drugs and other methods. I mean, it sounds cold, clinical, almost detached, right? But the targets? They weren't enemy combatants. They were unwitting citizens in universities, hospitals, prisons, and even pharmaceutical companies across the US and Canada. These were places of trust. These targets were often highly vulnerable populations, everyday people who had absolutely no idea they'd just been drafted into a high-stakes, undeclared psychological war.
To actually achieve these goals, researchers explored a truly terrifying array of tactics. We're talking about the covert administration of high doses of LSD, literally slipping powerful hallucinogens to people without their knowledge or consent. We're talking about severe sensory deprivation, systematic verbal abuse, and even electroshock therapy. By using these extreme methods on unsuspecting people, the program basically tore up the rulebook. They bypassed every ethical boundary imaginable because they wanted to understand the mind, and they were more than willing to tear it apart to get their answers.
Section 3. The devastating human cost. The real-world impact.
The intent behind all of this was incredibly chilling. Quote, behavioral engineering intended to break down individual personality, unquote. So this wasn't just about making someone briefly suggestible for an interrogation. Not at all. The ultimate goal of these experiments was the complete deconstruction of a person's psyche. They literally wanted to wipe the slate clean so they could completely reconstruct the mind from the ground up. In a way, they were trying to erase individuals. To truly understand the gravity of this, you have to consider the story of Frank Olson. He was an Army scientist deeply embedded in this exact research, but even he wasn't safe. Olson actually plummeted to his death from a hotel window under highly mysterious circumstances. This happened after he was secretly dosed with LSD by his own colleagues without his knowledge. His story is so important because it puts a tragic, human face on what is otherwise this massive, cold, bureaucratic tragedy. And Frank Olson's tragedy, unfortunately, was not an isolated incident. For the many participants who actually survived, the legacy of MKUltra was a lifetime of severe psychological trauma, lasting mental damage, and for some even death. It's crucial we remember that the permanent devastation inflicted on these participants happened to regular people who just woke up on a normal day, completely unaware they were about to become human test subjects in a covert government experiment.
Section 4, the accidental revelation, how the truth survived. Let's move to and see how this builds, because the sequence of events here plays out literally like a Hollywood thriller. In 1973, with the political heat really starting to turn up, the CIA director orders all MKUltra files to be destroyed. They genuinely thought the truth would just vanish as the paper burned. Fast forward to 1975, and the Church Committee in Congress starts uncovering fragments of this illegal experimentation. But here is the most incredible part. While the CIA successfully destroyed the scientific records, a small cache of financial expense reports had been stored in a totally different building and misfiled. A simple clerical error by accountants is what ultimately exposed the massive scale of this abuse to the world. The truth literally only survived by accident.
Section 5, a permanent cautionary tale, the lingering shadow.
Take a second and just imagine being one of those survivors or a family member of someone lost to this program. The exposure of MKUltra left them grappling with a profoundly horrifying realization. Their own government had treated them not as citizens with inherent rights, but as totally expendable components in a failed experiment. It is a massive betrayal of the fundamental social contract between a society and the very people chosen to protect it.
And this is exactly why the history of Project MKUltra continues to haunt us so deeply today. It wasn't just a military test of some new physical weapon. It was an attempt to control the very essence of what it means to be human, the mind itself. It stands as this concrete, terrifying example that really forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Institutional power, when it's unchecked by strict laws or a strong moral compass, can very easily descend into extreme, calculated cruelty. Which brings us to our final thought. The most dangerous conspiracies are often the ones that are proven to be true. MKUltra isn't some internet myth. It's a permanent cautionary tale for every single generation. It reminds us that protecting individual liberty, demanding transparency, and holding power accountable is the most vital and arguably the most fragile task of any free society. So when we look back at the dark files of MKUltra, the question we should be left with isn't just how did this happen back then, but rather, what are we doing today to ensure it can never happen again? Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.